Right, let's jump into another deep dive. This time, we're traveling back 50 years to the 1970s.
Groovy, right.
Totally. But forget the disco balls and bell bottoms for now.
Yeah.
We're digging into something even more far out.
Right.
The wild stuff people actually believed back then.
Absolutely.
We've got a whole stack of vintage stuff,
Oh,
articles, advertisements, even some scientific papers from the 70s, ready to unpack it all.
Oh, I am so ready. It's always so fascinating to look back and see how ideas and perspectives, well, they just change so much over time.
Yeah,
It's not about judging the past, but like understanding how we got to where we are today.
exactly.
And, who knows? Maybe taking this trip back in time will make us think twice about, well, some of the things we believe now.
Right. Okay, so get ready for some truly mind-boggling beliefs.
Buckle up.
Like, did you know doctors used to endorse smoking?
It's wild, right? It sounds absolutely crazy now, but back then, well, the science connecting smoking to, lung cancer and all those health problems, it was still developing. And we can't forget the tobacco industry had a massive influence on public opinion.
Oh, for sure.
They had those slick ad campaigns.
Oh, yeah.
Some even had doctors in like white coats
Wow.
telling everyone that cigarettes could relieve stress or even help with like digestion.
Seriously. Talking about misleading marketing, huh?
Oh, yeah.
It makes you think, like, what are we doing now that we'll look back on in 50 years and just cringe?
I know, right? What will future generations think we were doing?
But let's stick to the 1970s for now.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a perfect example of how much science can change. Remember those aerosol cans, like everyone used for everything?
Hairspray, deodorant, everything, right?
Yeah. It turned out those seemingly harmless sprays contained these chemicals that were, well, they were damaging the ozone layer.
Right. And to really get this, we need to back up a bit. The ozone layer, it's this protective shield high in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And it absorbs like most of the sun's harmful UV radiation.
Right.
And without it, well, we'd be exposed to way higher levels of UV rays.
Yeah.
And that can cause skin cancer and all sorts of other health problems.
So basically, people were accidentally contributing to this major environmental issue.
Yep.
Just by, like, doing their hair or using deodorant.
It's a wild thought.
It is. It's a pretty good reminder that even the everyday things we do can have, well, some pretty big consequences that we might not even think about.
Exactly.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about something a little less dire.
Yeah.
Let's talk about food.
Always a good topic.
Yeah. Specifically, the culinary masterpiece that was, well, the gelatin salad.
Ah, yes, the gelatin salad, a true icon of 1970s cuisine. Those molded creations, they were often this strange mix of savory and sweet ingredients, all suspended in brightly colored Jell-O.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think vegetables, meat, even mayonnaise,
Okay.
all jiggling together in this gelatinous delight.
I got to admit, the thought of mayonnaise and fruit cocktail in, like, lime Jell-O it's not exactly making my mouth water.
Yeah. Maybe not our taste today.
Maybe we should move on to something a bit less visually disturbing.
Maybe.
Speaking of things that might make you squirm a little, let's talk about those vibrating belt machines.
Oh, yeah.
The ones that promise to shake the pounds away.
Yeah.
Like you just strap yourself into this machine and let it jiggle your belly fat into oblivion.
Yeah. The idea was you could just sort of passively lose weight
Right.
without all that pesky diet and exercise.
It's amazing what people will believe, especially when it, comes to wanting a quick fix.
I know, right?
And speaking of beliefs that might surprise us today, what about the idea that sugar was like a weight loss aid?
Oh, this one really shows how much our understanding of nutrition has changed.
Right.
I mean, back then, the dangers of sugar weren't really widely known.
Mm-hmm.
And some people even believed that sugar, well, it could boost your energy and suppress your appetite.
Ah.
So they thought it was helpful for weight management.
Wait, so they were basically saying sugar crashes were like a good thing for weight loss?
Pretty much, yeah. It's amazing how much things have changed.
That's wild. Makes you wonder what other health fads from the past will make us raise an eyebrow, in the future.
Oh, absolutely. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We still have so much more to uncover about the fascinating and sometimes just bizarre beliefs of the 1970s.
Okay, so we've talked about smoking, sugary diets, and those vibrating belt machines. What other strange beliefs from the 1970s do we have?
Well, how about the great butter versus margarine debate?
Oh, yeah, margarine.
Yeah. You see, in the 1970s, margarine was marketed as the healthy choice. People were told to ditch the saturated fats in butter
Right.
and go for the supposedly heart-healthy vegetable oils in margarine.
So people were like spreading margarine on their toast, thinking they were making a heart-smart choice.
Exactly.
What's the story there? Was it just like clever marketing, or was there actually some science behind it?
Well, it was kind of both, actually. See, the science around fats was still developing back then.
Right.
And there were some genuine concerns about saturated fat
Okay.
and its link to heart disease. But what people didn't realize was that a lot of margarines, well, they contain trans fats,
Oh, right.
which is a type of unsaturated fat that we now know is even worse for you
Wow.
than saturated fat.
That's a pretty big oversight.
Mhm.
Seems like sometimes, the desire for healthy options, it kind of gets ahead of the science.
It definitely can.
Speaking of things that seemed like a good idea at the time, but had, some unintended consequences, let's talk about asbestos.
Oh, yeah, it's best.
Our sources mentioned it was like everywhere in the 1970s.
Oh, it was considered a wonder material. I mean, it was
Mhm.
fireproof, durable, and inexpensive.
Right.
You could find it in insulation, roofing, flooring, pretty much everywhere.
Wow.
The problem is, though, those tiny asbestos fibers, when you inhale them, they can cause some really serious respiratory problems, including lung cancer. And sadly, people didn't fully understand this until much later.
That's a pretty sobering thought. What seems like progress can sometimes have, some hidden dangers, huh?
It's true.
Okay, let's lighten the mood a bit here.
Okay.
One of our sources mentions that people in the 1970s, they couldn't imagine computers being small enough to fit in their homes.
It's funny to think about now, isn't it?
It is.
Back then, computers were these massive machines.
Yeah.
I mean, they took up whole rooms. Right.
And they were mainly used by, governments and big corporations.
Right.
The idea of having a computer on your desk, let alone in your pocket, was, it was practically science fiction.
It's amazing how far computer technology has come,
I know.
in such a short time. I mean, from those room-sized behemoths to, like, the sleek laptops and smartphones we have now.
Incredible.
It really is. It makes you realize just how fast technology can change. Okay, before we finish up our trip back to the 1970s, we got to talk about one more belief.
Okay.
This one's about tanning. Apparently, people thought baby oil was the best way to get a tan.
Oh, yeah, baby oil and tanning.
It's hard to believe now, right?
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, people would just slather themselves in baby oil and bake in the sun,
Yeah.
thinking they were getting the best tan possible.
Ouch.
But baby oil actually intensifies the sun's rays,
Oh, wow.
increasing the risk of burns and skin damage. Yeah, I can practically feel the sunburn just thinking about it. So we've covered a lot here. Misleading marketing, changing science, and some downright dangerous practices. What does all this tell us about how beliefs change over time? It is pretty wild, right? Looking back at all these beliefs from 50 years ago, it makes you wonder, what are we doing right now that future generations are going to look back on and just shake their heads at?
Oh, absolutely. It's such a good question. And a humbling one, too. It's tough to step outside our current perspective and imagine how our actions and beliefs, how they might be seen in the future. But I think it's a really worthwhile exercise.
Totally. It reminds us to stay curious.
Yeah.
And to be open to new information. And just remember that what we believe today, it might not be true tomorrow. A lot of what we've talked about today really highlights the importance of thinking critically.
Yeah.
Not just taking things at face value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Whether it's an advertisement or a scientific study or even just, cultural trends, it's so important to approach the world with a healthy dose of skepticism and a willingness to learn.
So well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the weird beliefs of the 1970s, I want to leave our listeners with a question. What current practices or beliefs do you think future generations will look back on with amusement or maybe even disbelief?
It's really something to think about. Maybe it'll be our reliance on single-use plastics or maybe our obsession with social media or even some of our dietary habits. I mean, what seems totally normal to us now, in 50 years, it could be seen as completely bizarre.
Yeah, maybe they'll be like digging through old internet archives
Yeah.
and just chuckling at our memes.
Yeah.
Or maybe they'll be amazed that we used to carry around these little rectangles
Yeah.
to access information instead of just having it seamlessly integrated into our lives. It's fun to imagine.
Yeah. But only time will tell, right?
That's the exciting part. The future is full of possibilities.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe our generation will end up being the ones who pioneer some ideas and practices that future generations will actually look back on and admire. It's up to us to shape the future we want to see.
I love that.
Well, on that note of optimistic curiosity, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey back to the 1970s, and we hope you'll keep exploring and questioning and learning right alongside us.